Hello and welcome to a new Hypi 101 session. In this session, we are going to learn about the directives related to GraphQL schema on Hypi. This session is outlined as follows. First, we learn what directives are, and then we learn the different directives available and their functionality illustrated through some examples. Let's start by defining directives. Directives are special annotations in the GraphQL schema or queries that describe the desired behavior. The behavior is not limited only to field value validation, but it can define how the field value is populated or even how it should be stored in the database. Directives should start with the @ sign, such as @required, meaning that a field cannot be null. Moreover, some directives can take parameters such as pattern, which validates the given value against a regular expression. Let's dive deeper into the directives supported on Hypi platform. Let's begin with the unique directive. The unique directive restricts the value of a column field to be unique. That is, if the client attempts to insert a value that already exists, then an error will be returned from the server. You can add the directive using the @ sign after the field data type. Now we shall discuss the length directive. This directive is used to apply a restriction on the size of a string. In case of a string, it limits the text size to the specified range. And similarly for arrays, it validates the number of elements in the array. However, for objects, it ensures the number of attributes that are not empty. For example, if there is a person object with two fields, first and last name, and if the length minimum is set to 1, then the validation will ensure that either one of the first or the last name is at least populated with non-empty values. Here is an example applying length directive on both a string and an array. It is worth mentioning that you can specify either min or max or both of them. You can set only a lower bound and vice versa. Now let's discuss the not empty directive. It ensures that a string or array are not null and not empty at the same time. They have at least one character or element respectively. For example, if a string consists only of white spaces, this directive will make sure that the backend returns an error. You may wonder what is the difference from required. The required directive will not throw an error if the string or the array are empty, but not empty directive will. As in the case of other directives, the @ sign is put after the data type. Now let's talk about a different directive, the indices. As in traditional database management systems, one can designate a column to be indexed. This instructs the database engine to map the column values to a tree that will return the identifier of the record in a logarithmic time. Hypi builds on the same concept to provide a robust way to efficiently retrieve required records. If your application filters a lot by a specific field or set of fields, add indices to ensure you continue to get high performance, even with billions of records. One can define an index by putting the @ sign on the type itself. That is a table-level directive. Also observe the nested square brackets, which imply that you can add multiple combinations of indices. If you commonly query by two sets of fields, add two sets of indices. Next, we move to a couple of directives that work with datetime types. Let's start with the past directive. As the name suggests, it is used to ensure that a given datetime value is in the past. A perfect example of this directive is to add validation on the date of birth. Likewise, the future directive. This will ensure that the client hasn't provided a datetime value in the past. For example, the case for credit card expiry date. Now let's move on to an essential directive that you will all probably use in your applications. The secret directive. It is used for encryption and hashing of field values. A typical client cannot query the value. By this I mean Hypi will not return the value via GraphQL. Secret fields are encrypted and cannot be decoded, except for PKCS5. You can only send a new value to be encrypted or hashed, and then the resulting value will be checked for equality with the value persisted in Hypi. The secret directive is ideally used for password fields. In Hypi, 3 algorithms are implemented: SHA-3, bcrypt, and PKCS5. PKCS5 is the only type that is reversible. Once data is encrypted with the others, the original value cannot be retrieved. But with PKCS5, the original value can be decoded and used in serverless functions or other applications on the platform. Now that PKCS5 values still cannot be returned to the front end. Observe here how the algorithm name is passed as a parameter to the directive inside the parentheses. Ensure that you choose the right encoding option. If you change this later, you must re-encode all past values since Hypi doesn't have a copy of the originals. Now let's discuss the pattern directive. The pattern directive is usually used to validate given values using a regular expression. Regular expressions on Hypi are based on Java syntax. Here is an example for validation of social security number using the regular expression. A special case of the pattern directive is email, but since this is not simple and is rather common, Hypi has provided it by default for you. The email directive ensures that a given value is in the correct email address format. The usage is similar to other directives that we have discussed so far. Now we shall discuss the HTTP directive, or as per Hypi docs, the API gateway. Hypi's API gateway can be thought of as a middleware that simplifies the integration of your app with other services. To use the API gateway, you must add a dependency to the gateway app. Once you have added a directive to a function, it can be treated like any other function on Hypi. The only thing special about it is that instead of getting the data from the Hypi platform or a serverless function, it will get the data from the HTTP service that you have configured. And here we introduce the computed directive for calculating the value of fields. The calculations can be done as a combination of multiple fields or by matching a query. This example demonstrates a type for social media post with calculated fields such as counting the number of likes. Last on the list today is the 10 directive. It allows the developers the ability to execute custom pieces of code in the cloud. If you are familiar with other serverless providers, the 10 function is not very different. You can execute Groovy, Velocity, or OpenFast serverless functions. There will be a dedicated section on this topic as we progress through the course. In this example, we define an example user-defined function UDF that takes an integer as a parameter and returns a string. In the Groovy code, we'll divide the integer value by 100 and format the string with a percentage sign before returning it. In this session, we have learned what a directive is and the different types of directives available in Hypi. Don't forget to check the Hypi documentation for latest updates and more examples. Thank you and see you in the next session.